Everyone, welcome to Make It Happen. My name is Dr. Brent Siebold. I lead this crazy series of amazing thought leaders coming in to share their thoughts and tips and tricks and best practices related to how to make a difference in the world, how to innovate, how to manage the messy process of changing the world for the better. So if you're new, welcome. If you're coming back, I've got to tell you, we've got a great dialogue scheduled for today. My dear friend and colleague, Lindsay Beagley, is here. She's the director of awesomeness at a brand new thing called Mirabella, which we'll probably talk about ad nauseum. In fact, we have a couple of Mirabellians here today. It's a breakthrough initiative that we have at Arizona State University, along with Shruti. She is a co-founder of an amazing company she's going to tell you all about. She also has 10 other jobs that she's probably going to reference throughout our dialogue. So thank you both for joining us here today for Make It Happen. Lindsay, do you want to kick us off and do a more professional job of introducing Shruti for me?
Absolutely. Well, thanks everybody. The idea for today's topic kind of started with a very small group of female entrepreneurs. Shruti and I joined on a whim of a group of female entrepreneurs, all of us passionate about this idea of how to connect generations, how to sort of how to create better services and products for older adults, knowing that we are experiencing a longevity boom in our world right now. People are living longer and healthier lives. And what does that mean for absolutely every industry? And so Shruti and I and this group of women would kind of nerd out every once in a while about these things and talk. And when we learned about Brent, this platform for that Brent hosts, we thought, hey, I wonder if these innovators, these students who are thinking entrepreneurially, know about what's happening in terms of lifespan, in terms of longevity, and what does that mean for their discipline? What does that mean for the industries that they're entering into or are already in? So my name is Lindsay Beagley. I'm the Director of Lifelong University Engagement for Mirabella at ASU, which is a new 20-story retirement community that's going up. It's going to be completed here in just a couple months on Millen University on the Tempe campus. And my role is really to plug all 400 residents who are living there into campus life and to not only help them find opportunities to learn, however and whatever it is they want to learn, but connect them meaningfully throughout the ASU ecosystem so that we're essentially transforming what retirement looks like. Instead of retirement communities being often isolated communities miles and miles outside of urban centers, what does it mean when we put a retirement community right in the center of campus, essentially? And how can we leverage the interesting and incredible knowledge that retirees have to support student learning and to support student success? So that's kind of the premise of Mirabella, and that's my role. I'll let Shri introduce herself and what Televeda is, and then we'll kind of start off with some level setting about what we mean by the longevity boom and the longevity economy, and start a discussion from there. Shruti, would you mind introducing yourself beyond my best female entrepreneur gal?
Thanks, Lindsay. That's very sweet of you. Thank you, everybody, for being here, for taking the time. I think you took the first step of initiative by actually being here, by getting here. I think the real rock star today is Lindsay. She has a lot of fun initiatives that she's thinking about for Mirabella. So if you get the time, and she has the time, I would really encourage you all to sit down with her, grab a cup of coffee, and hear how she's really innovating in the aging space, amongst the other things that she has going on. And I will let Lindsay talk about that. But my name is Shruti Gurudanti. I am the CEO, co-founder of Televeda. We are I have full my branding here. So we are a Phoenix-based startup, and senior living communities, municipalities, nonprofits that service a vulnerable population turn to us when they're striving to deliver virtual programs and engage their users socially, but they're frustrated with the amount of time, energy, and manpower and expertise it takes to create an ecosystem for the delivery of virtual programming and virtual socialization. So that's where we sort of step in and help create efficiencies for these organizations, and also help keep older adults, kids with special needs, or adults with special needs socially engaged and active by bringing the community experience really to them where they are. So that's a quick overview of me and Televeda.
Awesome. We'll connect all the dots here in just a moment. To start, I'm going to share my screen with you. Just one slide to kind of level set what we're talking about when we're talking about older adults, when we're talking about aging. I think some of us, and this is because our culture has made it so, we think about older adults living in kind of isolated ways. And that once you retire, you sort of go to one of these communities and you're not necessarily connected into the rest of society in some ways. And that is sort of crazy, but let's talk about just aging in general, what's happening in the world. In the United States specifically, there are 10,000 people who will turn 65 each day until 2030. And this is the baby boom generation. These are folks who are born between 1946 and 1964. It's about 77 million people in the United States, which is about a third, 20% to 30% of our population. And in Western European countries and in Asian countries, this is more like 40%. So it has come to the attention of the UN as a priority area. It's a significant portion of our population is getting older. And so that is because we have better healthcare, better nutrition, better medicine, right? All of these things are expanding our lifespans. And so over the next decade, the average life expectancy of children born in high-income countries is going to be 100 years. And right now it's around 87 or so. And so we're going to see significant gains in life expectancy. It's just going to be, we're going to see this trend exponentially. And so the first time, so we have a lot of people who are in this category, and we also have people living longer lives. So what does that mean? That means the first time in our nation's history, we have, our demography is top heavy, right? We have more people over the age of 65 than under 18, which makes sense, right? There's more years between 60 and 100 than there are between 0 and 18. And that top heavy demography is really what is kind of disrupting a lot of markets. It means that industries are having to think about, what do older consumers want? What do these people need? How, what do we need to change in terms of education, higher education? What do we need to change in terms of healthcare? What do we need to change in terms of just absolutely every industry is trying to figure out how do we adapt to what's going on. So another sort of data point that's interesting is that because this is such a large portion of our population, the spending of the 50 plus age group in the US, combined with downstream effects, accounts for nearly $8 trillion worth of economic activity. And that was in 2015, which was nearly half of the year's gross domestic products. And by 2030, that same population will account for half of all domestic consumer spending growth. So it's a huge part of our economy, and it's one market segment that most industries really don't understand. And part of that is because we've never seen this life stage before, right? We've never seen people live healthy, active lives post-career, post-retirement. And so what we tend to do is kind of project old notions of what retirement looks like. When Social Security was implemented in 1935, people were living to 63. So you'd retire and then you wouldn't have much of a life after that. But because people are healthy and because people are active, they're saying, I'm not ready to, just golf and nap for 30 years. I want to be involved. I want to do, I want to stay active. I want to be around younger generations. I want to make meaningful impact. So the demands are different than they were even just 30 years ago. And then finally, because it's such a big part of our population, going to have enormous implications for our government spending. By 2029, 2/3 of mandatory non-defense federal spending will go towards older adults. And that makes a lot of sense, right? It's a big portion of our population. So I'll pose the question to both Brent and Shruti. When you see these numbers, what does that mean for your work as educators, as entrepreneurs? What do you see in those numbers? What's the opportunity? And I'll end by saying most people characterize this as the silver tsunami, right? This is the huge, unpredictable thing that we have to solve. But I would say everybody on this call considers this a wonderful opportunity, that we regard people as older adults as an incredibly untapped resource that we just haven't figured out how to connect and how to tap into. So with that, Brent, do you want to share your reaction to these numbers?
Sure, although I do know that Shruti is very busy today, so I'd actually like to defer to Shruti if she wouldn't mind kicking us off with this discussion. And yeah, I'd of course love to chime in as well. So thanks, Lindsay.
Yeah. Shruti, how did these numbers inspire what you do, or how did they inspire what you started?
Thanks, Brent. I think what's really interesting to see is that we hadn't caught this, or we hadn't seen this trend early on, or we didn't recognize this trend early on. And so I think what's really critical to look at, and I can talk about it from a technology perspective, none of, or maybe none, but a majority of the technology that is built today has not been built for this audience. It's been built for the generation that loves TikTok or Instagram, like the quick, instant, or people who have dexterity. They're quick on their phones and they know how to type. So I think there's so much when it comes to technology to see how can we create, new products and new services that are actually going to be built for this demographic, and then that can be used by this demographic. I mean, this demographic has a tremendous spending power, but none of the products that are being built today are being built keeping them in mind. So something to think about is, okay, what am I thinking of in terms of a product that will be used by, a population that really needs a service at this point in time. But I also would say be cautious about, yes, we start looking at the 50 plus demographic, but within that 50 plus, there are so many sub demographics. So be very careful about what product you are creating for which demographic. And the example for that would be, think about when you create like a Peloton, right? Like a Peloton is an amazing product, can be used by individuals who are 50 plus, but it cannot be used by an individual in their 90s. So be very thoughtful about, yes, there's a silver tsunami coming, but am I creating a product for, a particular segment, or is it for everybody? So just be thoughtful of that, because the one thing that I notice a lot of times, when you're just starting out a business or a company or an idea, is people look at oh my God, 10,000 people are turning 65 every single day. That just means I'm going to create like all of these really cool products that people need for this demographic. But it's like, it's so niche within that, that you got to be careful and mindful about that. But I definitely think that there's not enough being done. And think about the number of people who are going to need housing, who are going to need healthcare, who are going to need wellness, who are going to need grocery shopping. There is so much to be done within these individual silos that you can literally pick one. I know, Lindsay, you're working on housing, and that's a great market to think about. Within housing, I think one of the good opportunities for people to think about is, how do you help people age longer at home, or excuse me, within a place where they feel comfortable? So what are those equipments that we can create to make it nice and friendly for them to age in the quarters that they like? It could be a senior living community, it could be their home, it could be their daughter's home. So I think, yes, this is a tremendous opportunity, and especially from a technology standpoint, but you have to be very cautious about what is that niche that you're picking, and within that niche, make sure that you find a pair for yourself. So this is sort of the cynic in me, but my experience has been that with this demographic, you have to be very careful about who's going to pay for the product that you're creating. Because many times we think, oh yeah, my 85-year-old grandma would be totally fine about, using Uber or something like that. But that's not the case. You will start to see that, they have limited resources and they have a limited budget that they live on. So before you create that product, be careful of figuring out who that payer is. Is it an insurance company? Is it the adult child? Is it the adult themselves? Is it a senior living community? There are so many sort of variations within that. So again, be very mindful of thinking about before you start creating a product, who's going to pay for it and if someone's going to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
Those are my 2 cents.
It's worth noting that you'll see oftentimes, 65 and above, and just as Shruti says, 65 to 85, 85 to 90, like these are completely different life experiences, lifetime, life moments. And we don't culturally necessarily have like milestones to say, the stage right after retirement looks like this. The stage 10 years after retirement looks like that. We have that in our minds for the first 50 years, right? We know, okay, there's, childhood, and then there's high school, and then there's college. And then we sort of think 20 to 40 is like working years, raising family years. And we don't really necessarily have a cultural conceptualization of what are milestones or what are experiences post-career that will define the needs and desires of an older adult. And so part of that is because we don't measure it. The census asks, are you 65 and older? They don't ask anything beyond that. So we don't have, a lot of times you'll see, just as Shruti said, the second half of life is like lumped together as if it's not differentiated.
Totally. And I think what we're seeing with as life expectancy is increasing, more and more people want to work longer. They want to work. But my father, he's in his early 60s, and the guy is busier than he's ever been post-retirement. It's ridiculous. But what's interesting is that more and more people are staying longer in the workforce. So you need more products for that workforce, sort of demographic. That also means that more people are aging in their home for a longer period of time, and they're going at a later stage to senior living communities, which also is like a significant opportunity, because I think when you think about adults who need care, that is a market that is inevitable. Like, you will need care. It's not something that's a choice. It's not an option. You have to have that need that you need. So it's very interesting and it's very critical that you really understand which segment you really want to focus on and you really want to help, because I feel like today there's not very much difference between someone who's 65 and who's 55. They need the same resources, they need the same product. So again, just be mindful of that.
Mm-hmm.
Lindsay, if I may, I just want to thank Shruti. I couldn't have scripted your response any better, specifically those last couple of sentences you shared just now, and then about 2 or 3 minutes ago. Many of the folks that have joined us here today and those that might be enrolled in some of the classes that I teach, this is exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about very specific customer archetype, personas, sketches, descriptions, as a means of identifying who these people actually are. And to Lindsay's point, what are the very unique scenarios that they're experiencing post-retirement or in early retirement? And how do we work backwards as innovators from those very specific people in those very specific contexts to add value to their lives? So Shruti, you nailed it. And Lindsay, recognizing that this is an uncharted environment that is not yet segmented the way that it needs to. For all of us here that aspire to be innovators, to add value to people's lives, what you're hearing from both Lindsay and from Shruti should be basically this massive invitation. Nobody else is, well, I shouldn't say nobody, but very few people from our perspectives are spending the time to really add value in this domain. And I also while I have the microphone, if I may, we do have at least one of these folks in the audience here today who are in this demographic. But I come from a very unique perspective within ASU, where for the past decade, I've been working directly with semi-retired and fully retired senior level executives, serial entrepreneurs, consultants who, just like Shruti and Lindsay just described, and Shruti's dad specifically, they're nowhere near done being done, right? So specifically within ASU, we run a program called Venture Devils, and Venture Devils wouldn't be what it is without the 50 plus academic affiliates who we employ as venture mentors. And I would argue probably about 2/3 of that group are in the 55 and 65 plus bracket. And those folks have become some of my most dynamic colleagues in the domain of entrepreneurship and innovation. And I would argue more broadly in the domain of education. So what better way to engage this population than to pay it forward? Because this is a theme that I hear from probably Shruti, people like your dad. Now that they've achieved success in their career and they're at a stable position within their family and their circle of friends, many of these folks are now asking themselves, how do I pay it forward? How do I repay my debts to society? And I think here at ASU and many places like ASU, we have the opportunity to build a platform to engage that talent. I think Lindsay can talk about that, but then others of us, and I'm looking at the audience, Doug specifically and Alex specifically, are a lot like you, Shruti, where they're now excited about how might I add value from a startup perspective, so a non-educational perspective. So I think we have the makings of a really dynamic, Q&A opportunity here, Lindsay, when you and Shruti are ready, because I'm sure a lot of folks in the audience will be wanting to unpack the nuances of both of those domains.
So I just want to push on that, the issue that you brought up just a little further. You are so right that people, I feel like we forget that the folks who are retired have been ex-pilots, ex-scientists, engineers, doctors, lawyers, and somehow we feel like it is okay for them to be, just playing bingo, bunko, mahjong, and chilling, but that's not the case. And I think that's why Mirabella is such a great organization and such a great community, because you're really giving these folks who are so highly educated, just like all of us, the opportunity to continue to learn, to continue to grow, and to find that meaning and purpose in life. It's so important that we consider them not just, okay, you've retired and you're not contributing to the economy anymore. That's not it. There's so much more you want to continue to help them grow, continue to help them learn, so that they can come back and, give back to the community, and just like the ways they're giving back to ASU. So I really think the way Mirabella is structured, it is such a wonderful place for older adults to come find meaning and purpose in life and find that connectivity with the younger generation, but also the resources of continuing, to learn and grow, which is awesome. They're being treated like adults, I think. I feel like sometimes once people retire, we try to treat them like kids, but
they are the most experienced among us, right?
Exactly.
So in my mind, it's like, how are we not, engaging them in extremely, meaningful ways to achieve our collective goals, our collective society's goals? Shruti, let me pitch a question to you, because I don't know how much of your time we have. You have an important client meeting coming up in the life of an entrepreneur that I think everybody in this call is sensitive to.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I really, truly do apologize. It's just something out of the blue that came up. But I have 10 minutes. So,
okay,
and
great.
I really am sorry. I'm very apologetic. You guys can email me, shruti@televeda.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, but I'm terrible at responding to the messages, but I will find it at some point in time. But if you really need to reach me, shruti@televeda.com.
Great.
Sorry, Lindsay.
No, I'm glad. I want people to know about your organization. I would love for you to share a little bit. Just, I'm aware that there are so many innovators and inventors and entrepreneurs that are emerging post-career, right? Because you have sort of some clarity, you have a career of knowledge, of information that you can repurpose to be entrepreneurial. But here we are sort of at a very different phase of life, innovating for a phase of life that we haven't yet achieved.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I'm very aware of that, you know, and for my purpose, I am always considerate of being a constant learner. And that's why, you know, our interactions with John and Sandy on the call are important and critically important for us, because we're constantly learning. What ambitions do you have? What do you want? What do you need, right? Because we're the designers for their experience.
Yep.
How do you consider, you know, you're a young entrepreneur developing products and services for a stage of life that you're not in yet. How do you navigate that?
That's a great question. We have built everything so far today based on feedback from our users, so from our seniors. And the one thing that I will say is that seniors are not, or I shouldn't call them seniors, but our users are not shy to tell us what they don't like and what they like, which is great. But I think everything that we have built has been very custom for the demographic that we serve. And I'll give you an example. So our software, so we are a virtual recreation center for older adults and folks with special needs. We have no username, no password, no download. And the reason for that is because our users came back to us and said, hey, when we use Zoom or when we use platforms that require us to remember a password, our dog's first name, it just is like really difficult for us to keep a track of all these things. And so can you create something which doesn't have the requirement to do all of this? So we said, okay, fine. Then they also came back to us saying that, you know, we like something where we don't have to download multiple times. So again, I go back to Zoom because this is, you know, we're using it right now, but if you know, you have to download Zoom and then interact with a class or an audience or whatever it may be. So when we got the feedback that, you know, download is difficult, we took that out. So really listening to your audience is important. And as part of our recreation programs as well, we're constantly doing surveys from our users. Like, what classes do you want to see? What do you want to learn? And I think what I presumed initially was that, okay, we're going to see more classes. Like, people are asking us for, how do you play Mahjong, or how do you find solitaire online or play like that? But it was so interesting to see the feedback that we got from our users was, can you bring in a NASA scientist to talk about the space mission to Mars? Can you talk about, you know, can you actually connect us to the International Space Station? Which I was like, well, that's a bit much. We might not get there. But we were actually able to get a professor from ASU who worked on, you know, a NASA mission, and he then spoke about and did a series for us. So it's, you really have to listen to what they want and then build accordingly. And then you will see that, you know, the adoption in your product then becomes so much better. I think, again, going back to the point of, this is an audience that wants to learn, wants to grow, and wants to continue to find purpose in life. So when I can talk about my product, and that's why we try to do more and more educational events, educational classes, things like how do you use, we had a super hit class on how to create Instagram Reels. It was really cute to see how they really wanted to learn Instagram and how do you create Reels and how do you share that and what's TikTok. So again, we use surveys and we have phone calls.
I don't even know what TikTok is.
I don't know how to create Reels on Instagram. But yeah, so my point is that do surveys, take that feedback very seriously. And I think this is a demographic, at least my demographic, which is 75 plus. We see that folks are more than happy to share and give feedback, and actually give lengthy feedback and very critical feedback. So, but you got to be open to hearing. Yeah, you've got to be open to hearing, and you got to be constant and very cautious about getting that feedback.
Yeah, there's a great, if this sparks anything for you all, there's a great book called The Longevity Economy by the director, Joseph Coughlin, who's the director of the MIT Age Lab. And he talks a lot about how many companies, major companies, I'm talking like, you know, car companies, motorcycle companies, you know, all kinds of companies that have made major missteps in their product designs because they made assumptions about what this user demographic wants and needs. And it turned out to be products that were very antiseptic and very medical and very clinical, and we're treating these users like patients instead of consumers, instead of active people who have goals and dreams and you know, opinions, and they totally didn't get who they were designing for, and the consumers rejected their products in a very catastrophically expensive way to say, that's not who we think we are. We are, you know, athletes, we are inventors, right? Like, you have projected an identity onto us that is not how we see ourselves, which is critical if you're a designer and if you're an innovator, to really be careful about what you're, you know, what assumptions you're making in your designs.
Totally, totally. I think the life alert that people wear as a locket, that could be designed so much cooler. Like, there's so much.
For sure. And it was even down to, like, you know, Harley Davidson nailed it, and they made this like beautiful bike that was just a little bit lower to help, you know, the ease of getting on and off for older users, but they still made it slick and beautiful and like, right, like they totally got the identity of the user.
Yeah, I 100% agree. We pay so much attention to our design and how it looks, because you need to make people feel like they're active, they're engaged, they're feeling, you know, it's not like they feel like they're going into a professional hospital setting or something like that. So use bright colors. But I see that there are some questions here.
Yeah, I've got some questions for you.
Yeah, I was gonna, if it's okay, I was gonna actually call on Sai and maybe Gabe to chime in while we still have Shruti here in the next 5 minutes.
Yeah, let's do it.
But I also want to point out, I love all of this talk about being user-centered. So in many of our disciplines at ASU, within engineering, within design, within business, we have this idea of human-centered design, right? So I made a joke earlier on chat about, is it better to call these folks users or seniors? But as many of my students will support, you know, at the core, they're humans, right? And they're human beings with names and personalities and preferences. And so the more, you know, tuned in we can be to that customer archetype and that customer experience, the more opportunity we have to build something magical. And it's clear that, Shruti, you're doing that in real time. So Sai, do you mind chiming in and maybe putting a human voice to your connection or to your question on chat?
Thank you for the opportunity, Brent. Shruti, your talk has been really insightful, and I have a question for you.
Sai,
you put yourself on mute.
Yeah, you're on mute there,
Yeah.
Sai.
Are television services available only to rehabilitation centers that house the old people? And are they required to have the necessary technological devices in-house in order to support your software?
Yes. So right now, in order to participate on our platform, you have to be a resident of one of our partner organizations. So it's our software is available to any organization, whether it's a senior living community or a rehab community or an adult daycare center or just a nonprofit that provides services to a vulnerable population. So it's not based on living, but it's based on who you are associated with. To your question about do they have to have some sort of a device, the answer is yes. They do need to have some sort of a device that can have internet on it, and it could be a toaster, but as long as it has internet on it, we are able to have our platform run on it. So again, we are a device agnostic, so it doesn't matter, phone, iPad, laptop, computer, whatever that might look like. Now, we have some folks, of course, who have their own personal devices, but then when you go into communities that are low income, then your organization is the one that purchases the devices and then provides it to this demographic. Now, one of the myths that I really do want to talk about is that people assume that this demographic is not tech savvy and they don't have devices. These are not 100% true. 85% of people in this demographic have a smartphone, and in fact, I want to say about, I think the number is over 65% actually spend several hours on Facebook already today. And the age, like people who are now coming into this demographic have grown up with Facebook and smartphones and all of that. And those ideas that, you know, this demographic is not going to be very tech savvy, it takes a lot of time. Again, I think keep in mind that everything we use today has had an adoption. We didn't have a microwave, we didn't have a flat screen TV, we had our bathrooms outside our house. You know, everything has changed over time, and this demographic has learned how to change and evolve. So you just have to be patient with them, and I think that's where people lose you know, that's where they lose traction, because they're not patient with teaching them and not patient with building something that is meant for them. So if that's something that you were wondering that, oh, I don't know if I should build, like my grandma, I'm her tech support all the time, and think about that again.
That's great. Also, so that means individual elderly don't have access to your platform?
So if you're talking about, can you buy this for your parent, grandparent, loved one
Exactly.
as a monthly subscription? The answer is unfortunately no, not at this time. I wish I did, because we're going into the holiday season and it would be a great way to see how this would work. But we're not a B2C, we're not a business to consumer product. We are a business to business enterprise. That being said, right now, we do have a COVID response from the Televeda team. So if anybody on this call has a parent, grandparent, loved one, no matter where they are in the country, if you think that they're feeling, you know, that they're inside their homes a lot, they're not able to get out, they may be at a risk of loneliness or isolation, or you just feel that they want to do something fun and meet other people, please reach out to me. We're giving our membership for free during this period of time so that they can stay connected and find an organization. I recently had someone join our platform who lost his partner a few weeks back and really is at the risk of isolation and loneliness. But he's now on our platform, made friends instantly, connected with other people who had the same experience, and now is part of our Facebook group and chatting. So if you have anything like that you would like to reach out to me about, please.
Great,
Thank you. That's so cool.
Yeah, thanks, Sai. And before we get to Gabe and Doug and others who are asking great questions, I want to be respectful of Shrudi's time. Lindsay, do you want to wrap up and let Shruti go from her perspective? Content, I think you know enough to be dangerous, where we can probably address a lot of the questions that we're getting on chat on behalf of Shruti, but certainly want to be respectful of her situation.
Thank you. And again, please feel free to email me, you guys. I apologize for this.
That's great. Oh, Lindsay's on mute. Lindsay, you have to say goodbye.
Sorry. Bye, Shruti. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll make sure that everybody's got your email and has your website as well, so they can follow up on what you're doing.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Lindsay. Thank you so much, Brent. And thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend. Stay safe.
Thanks, Shruti.
Bye. Thank you.
So, Lindsay, do you want to bring us back to the larger discussion point? I think,
Sure.
Obviously, Televeda is a very compelling platform, and I know many of the folks here are actually considering their own interventions into this dynamic economy opportunity. But I think it would be really useful maybe for you to tell us a little bit more about Mirabella and maybe a little bit more about your entrepreneurial forays into this aging economy.
Sure.
And then we can maybe open it up from there.
Yeah.
Lindsay,
So, oh,
this is John. Just really quickly, just
yeah.
let everybody know that like you've got two like Sandy and I are 74, so we'll answer any questions that you all might have.
Thank you. I didn't want to call you out in case you were wanting to be flies on the wall, but I hope that everybody on this call is noticing that I'm super, open and collaborative about talking about this stuff because John and Sandy, in my opinion, are co-creators. They are, part of every discussion of every design decision we make about how to integrate Mirabella into ASU. So let me kind of set up how what Shruti's doing is differentiated from other things going on in this space. 90% of people in post-retirement want to what they call age in place, meaning I want to stay in my home as long as possible. Dang it, I paid 40 years into this mortgage and nobody is going to, take me out of my house. Well, the reality is, as we get older, we have unexpected medical events. And a lot of folks are saying, I don't want my kids to suddenly have to deal with the burden of making an urgent medical decision on my behalf. I don't want them to have to uproot from their mortgage that's 2,000 miles away. I want all of this stuff. I want peace of mind that I will be able to have the care I need at the point that I need it. And that is what we call a life plan community, which means it is a retirement community that has primarily independent living, so essentially apartments, right, or condos or whatever, just anything you can imagine in terms of what you'd have in like an apartment complex. But then they have layers of additional care. So there's a assisted living units, which means a certain level of in-home care being provided to everybody that lives there. Then there's memory care in case there's some cognitive decline. And then there's skilled nursing, which, if you've gone to the hospital and you need to recover from a procedure and you don't want to be in the hospital for 9 weeks, you can come and be in the skilled nursing facility. So a life plan community has all of these levels of care. And a lot of people like to live in this model because it gives you a sense that like, when I need the care, it'll be there. But until then, I'll just go about my day and not be far from the community that I've chosen. So that's really what Mirabella is. It's a life plan community, but what makes it unique is that it is a university-based retirement community, which means it is on Tempe's campus. And that is not an accident. That is very sought after property. But we put a retirement community there. I mean, the leaders of this university did, because one of the main missions of ASU is how can we make learning available to everybody from every background and at every stage of life. And universities, traditional universities, have down pat this idea of, teaching and educating the 18 to 22-year-old demographic, and are starting to get better at educating post-traditionally aged students, people who've started college and dropped out and then came back, or working parents or veterans, right? People who are at a different stage of life. But what ASU is entering into, and this is where I think for those of you who aren't entrepreneurs but consider yourselves intrapreneurs, I'm that, right? Like I'm working within the university to realize a vision for how can a university, a public university, meet the needs of learners after they've completed their career. They're not learning to get a degree. They're not learning to put it on their resume. They're not learning to impress their employer and get a promotion. They are learning for the love of learning. And what is a university's role in responding to the needs of human learning throughout their lifetime? And that's really what Mirabella is. It's an innovation to respond to that design imperative. And so what we're doing is doing a lot of listening, learning, and co-creating with our friends John and Sandy here and 300 other people who want to have a voice in transforming essentially what retirement can look like when you take it, Sun City, which is, these retirement communities 20 miles outside of urban centers. What happens when you put them right in the center of an urban center and start interacting with students? And my sort of inspiration for getting into this field is I was a Peace Corps volunteer. And when I was in Honduras, I would see these communities that were intergenerationally interdependent, right? So you'd have grandparents watching grandkids so that the parents could go to work and make an income for the whole family. And you'd see these family systems where everybody was thriving when they leaned on one another. And so similarly, some part of the vision of Mirabella is how can we ensure student success when we put post-professionals with pre-professionals? What sort of magic can happen when we put them in close proximity together and create these sort of intergenerational connections? So that's the premise of Mirabella, and I'll leave it to Brent to kind of see whether or not we want to scope out to some of the questions.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic, because I have a sense that some of the folks that have joined the call, A, didn't know it existed, and B, if they did know it existed, might be scratching their head as to what the heck are these people, John and Sandy, thinking. Moving on to...
you can ask them. Ask John and Sandy, what are you thinking?
Well, so in addition to that question, John and Sandy, what were you thinking? I think Doug had a question earlier on chat, and maybe Doug, if you're willing to unmute, kind of asking a more broad question about health and activity as it relates to this unique stage of life. So Doug, do you want to say hi to everybody, and more specifically Lindsay and John and Sandy, who is in the background with John?
First of all, I'm just really happy to be here. I think it's a super interesting talk. I think the idea of a retirement community on ASU campus sounds like an excellent opportunity, just like Lindsay, you're talking about this interconnectedness between generations. Super fascinating. The thing that I'm researching in particular, though, is physical activity. You know, there are very few miracle drugs in this world, but one of them is physical activity, and there's a myriad of benefits. Including, you know, like I said in the chat, it can reduce the prevalence of chronic disease. The annual healthcare cost for individuals over 50 is $890 billion. 4 out of 5 of the most expensive procedures are related to chronic disease that is likely preventable with physical activity. Despite this, we know that over 31 million Americans over the age of 50 are totally sedentary. That means they have zero physical activity. So I'm curious to learn about your perspectives on this and maybe understand the user perspective. And so that's why I'm here.
I'll defer to John and Sandy. I can speak to the design of Mirabella and how we're tackling that, but I'd love to hear whether or not that was part of John and Sandy's decision to move to Mirabella.
Yeah, this is John. Yeah, I'm fairly physically active, but let me just kind of tell you a little bit about quickly through my life. I was a naval officer when I was younger, you know, in my 30s. You know, I would run about 5 miles a day, or ride my bike about 15. Sandy would ride her bike every day. She would alternate riding her bike about 12 miles, and then the next day she'd run 5. But when I got to like 55, it was like running was difficult. So I kept, you know, I would run maybe once or twice a week, continue with the bike riding is no problem. But so then the dilemma with bike riding is, it's not that I was afraid of bike riding, but I had a couple of spectacular accidents on my bike, which if anybody's a bike rider knows. So, you know, now I'm getting to be in the 60s. Now, if I fall off my bike in one of these spectacular accidents where I was just a little scratched up and bloody, you know, when I was 45, I might break something. Okay, so the bike has gone by the wayside, although I really, really like riding my bike. And I think when we get over to Mirabella, I can zip over to the, you know, the trail along Tendytown Lake, and I can probably get in a good couple of miles without having to, you know, worry about cars and stuff like that. You know, I know that I've slowed down a little bit. I used to be able to do math in my head. I could do trig in my head. Now I have to write it down. You know, and you've got to recognize what your limitations are, but I still do a lot of, well, the COVID business has really screwed me up a bit, but on Fridays, we used to, when we were living in Mesa, we would hike every Friday. We would generally go at least 6 miles. 6 miles if we were climbing. If we were not climbing, we'd go about 10. So now I could continue to do that. I don't like to hike alone anymore because, and not that I'm afraid, it's just it's not safe. And besides that, Sandy would kill me if I go on my own. So, we carry a spot when we do hike in case we get into trouble. We can, we've had to use it once, and it was pretty interesting to see all the helicopters and, and rescue ATVs, come after one of the guys that we had problems with. But so I don't hike anymore alone. So, and that's a challenge. And there's some hiking groups around, but they don't, and I don't mean to be bragging or anything, but they're too tame for me. So now I'm doing some other things, until we get back down to Mirabella. But now as I get older, and, I'm probably not going to be able to hike that much, but there's a gym right there. I can walk. There's a lot of walking. I can climb a mountain every day. That's not like climbing, to Everest or going up to Flatiron. But, for an 80-year-old, doing that once a day is probably not all that bad. If I can do that, I'd be happy. But I do think that Doug's got a good point, and that you've really got to keep active. I don't know how you motivate people to stay active. I know a lot of older people and they just don't do anything. And I don't know, Doug, there's your opportunity. How can you, you don't have to, you're preaching to the choir if you talk to me, but our hiking group was only 5 people out of the core group, out of, probably a couple of hundred. If we take all 5 of us, we probably knew 300 or 400 people. Mm-hmm. Some of them would go with us, and, they'd go once or twice, and then they would just sort of like drop out. I think you've hit right on one of the key attributes. And there's a book called Younger Next Year, and then there's one for women that basically say exactly what you're saying, but that people don't follow that. So I hope that long-winded, discussion was helpful.
In terms of Mirabella's design, this is no secret. It's because it's, designed by healthcare professionals. This is absolutely part of its design. And part of the way that we have tackled that is I'm not including myself in this, but the architects and the university leaders, because it's right on campus, it increases walkability factor exponentially, right? Because if you are interested in performing arts, it is much more likely that you are going to walk to, Gamage, or walk to the Galvin Playhouse or whatever. And by the end of the day, I don't know if you're on campus, but I'm at 10,000 steps easily at the end of a day on campus. And so just by increasing the power of proximity to the things that do motivate them, that do inspire them, that do spark, whatever, the life force in a human, you're just going to get steps, you're going to get walking as a byproduct of that. And to me, that's one of the most exciting things, is there's very few barriers to engagement and health at Mirabella. It's not like this is 1 mile off campus where they have to schedule a bus to come to campus, and make it a whole day of it. They can just wander downstairs and go for a coffee, and then maybe get caught up at something here and notice something there. And by the end of the day, they have not only engaged in a meaningful way, or whatever way that, is meaningful to them, but they're walking, right? They're moving around, they're doing that. And that is going to be a huge, huge benefit, I think, for everybody living there.
Hey, just want to say thanks, John, for giving basically what we call in the domain of entrepreneurship and innovation management, the equivalent to a customer interview or a user conversation. So on behalf of Doug, thank you, John, for that insight that you shared. And Lindsay, I think I speak on behalf of most people here. We're really excited to see what you're describing come to life. And, if you are an innovator who is focused on solving friction points, challenges, problems demonstrated within this new and exciting longevity economy. Personally, based on the stats you shared earlier, I can't wait to live to 100 years old. And also, I am targeting the mid to late 2030s as my retirement date. And I personally don't see myself doing any kind of standard retirement stuff. I hope to be living in Marabella, quite frankly, first of all. And then second of all, I hope to continue to play an entrepreneurial role at ASU or in other places within the community. So, Lindsay, thank you so much. You're certainly, if not the foremost expert in this domain at ASU, you're definitely one of the leading thought leaders. So to have you here to share and guide this conversation is extremely powerful. So we're right at an hour. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. But then hopefully if folks have time, we can continue to engage in some Q&A. So on behalf of everybody here, thank you, Lindsay, and thanks to Shruti as well. Round of applause.
Yay, thank you, everyone. Anybody else wants to nerd out?